families, creating a lifetime of memories. Sadly, some families are denied these important moments due to the sad practice of alienation. These are families divided.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Families Divided TV. Children spend a lot of their time in school, and school staff can observe changes in a student's behavior. So teachers, principals, counselors, and all those who meet children and parents should know about the effects of parental strife and separation on children, so as to identify those children who are affected by what goes on at home and problematic behaviors by parents, and thereby refer to parents to get suitable advice and therapy for themselves and the child before the situation deteriorates into psychological abuse or neglect of the child and alienation. In this episode, retired Israeli judge Philip Marcus will be speaking to us on this topic. We'll also be hearing from attorney Jordan Traeger, who will be a presenter at our upcoming fall conference in October. He's going to share with you his topic of what he'll be speaking on. The subject of our conference is alienation, the truth regarding the trauma and abuse. This is going to be a tremendous conference. This topic is so off the charts in being so important. And we've got 11 of the top presenters from across the world that will be presenting for us. So I do hope you'll register. Now is a great time to register. So you want to get the best pricing, and this is it. So we're going to be bringing you these things right after these messages.
Divorce and co-parenting are a major life interruption for families, especially the kids, but also for parents and grandparents. And it's even worse in blame-filled, high-conflict cases. When parents engage in alienation by turning the kids against the other parent or grandparents, kids suffer. They're denied the opportunity to build the 4 big skills necessary for future resilience. New Ways for Families online class can help. Parents learn to use our popular BIF and EAR skills to calm the conflict and stop the hostile emails and texts. And we even have a class for kids and parents to learn together. Research shows a 75% improvement in joint parental decision-making after this course is taken, plus overall improvements for kids' well-being. Don't wait to make this affordable investment in your children's future and improve your well-being too. Start learning new ways for your family today at conflictplaybook.com.
Hi, my name is Jordan Traeger from Wisselman Harunian Family Law. I'm going to be doing a presentation on parental alienation cases from a legal perspective with a focus on abuse and trauma. So just a little bit about my presentation. It's going to be broken up basically into 2 parts. The first part is going to be focusing on parental alienation from a legal perspective. And then it will turn to the second part, which is the severe long-term psychological impact on children who are the victims of parental alienation, and specifically how to present that information to a court and to a judge to make the judge aware of the serious consequences of either inaction in a parental alienation case or failing to act with haste in a parental alienation case. So generally, from a legal perspective, I would be improving parental alienation. And by the way, I think the courts are starting to finally recognize parental alienation. The larger issue that I'm starting to encounter is the fact that they're unsure what to do about it. But some of the issues that I'll be presenting is direct and circumstantial proof of parental alienation from an evidentiary perspective. The court's approach to in-camera interviews, that's when a child and his or her attorney is seen by a judge in chambers. The role of the attorney for the child and the child's therapist, which is very important in a parental alienation case. How the courts weigh the best interest analysis in a parental alienation case specifically, as opposed to a general custody case, and how custody may or may not be determined in that type of case, and how and when the courts consider and use various remedies to alleviate the pernicious effects of parental alienation, specifically the use of no contact orders, reunification therapy, and something called team therapy. So specifically regarding the severe long-term psychological impact on children who are victims of parental alienation, my presentation is going to focus on the negative consequences, the negative outcomes, I should say, suffered by victims of parental alienation. And specifically, some of these outcomes, these negative outcomes, include children, and I'm just going to read this off very quickly, children suffering from, quote, a shorter lifespan, depression, anxiety, social withdrawal, aggression, acting out, low self-esteem, insecure attachments, substance abuse disorders, fears and phobias, the inability to trust themselves and others, poor academic performance, poor physical health, neurological damage, the inability to think critically, and developmental delays. Those are all possible negative outcomes due to parental alienation when the courts either do not act quickly enough or if they don't act at all. So I look forward to seeing you at the presentation, and thank you very much.
Good day, everybody. It's a great privilege to be invited again to speak and give some information about what we do in order to prevent parental alienation. I want to start by saying that in my career as a judge, I dealt with many, many cases involving interference with contact. And I came to the conclusion, since I retired, that we need to invest as much effort as possible in preventing these situations from coming about. So in the last few years, I've been lecturing and writing on topics to do with prevention. And my idea is that we should treat parental alienation, that is, where one parent willfully and without connection to the welfare of the child inhibits or restricts or stops contact with the other parent. That is a psychological maltreatment of the child and can lead to very serious health problems in the child, both psychological and neurological and physical problems. And therefore, it has to be dealt with as a public health issue. So I've taken my model from the medical field. What do we do when there is a problem? So first of all, we want to prevent it. That's why we do inoculations. That's why I remember when I was a small child, there was a polio epidemic, we were told to wash our hands after going to the lavatory. That is primary prevention. The second stage is when you suspect there's something going on. Suppose you get a sore throat. Then you go to the pharmacy and buy some kind of medicine or pills or sweets to suck. If that doesn't go away, then you go to your family physician. That is secondary treatment. If then your family physician cannot deal with it, he'll send you to a specialist and you may have to go to the hospital, and that is tertiary medical care. Tertiary medical care, the parallel with parental alienation is court proceedings. And we know that court proceedings are expensive and they take a long time. I've spoken about training of judges and training of lawyers and training of experts, but the ultimate outcome, as far as the child is concerned, is that a lot of time has passed when he's not or she's not in contact with the parent, and that itself can lead to serious problems. So we have to go back to prevention and then early identification of a child who is clearly suffering or affected by the parents' separation and divorce, and immediate intervention so that the situation will not deteriorate to such an extent that the child stops having contact with one of his or her parents and the extended family. So I've been working with a number of different professions. I've been working with social workers and social work students, psychologists, lawyers, and educators. And what I'm going to speak about today is about the role of educational institutions, both in prevention of situations in which the child may lose contact with a parent, but also about immediate or rather early identification of the child who is affected by the parental breakup, and also referrals for immediate intervention so as to, as far as possible, stop the deterioration of the situation. So let's talk first about prevention. This may seem obvious to some people, it may seem outrageous to others. But in high schools, most students have relationship lessons. It may be to do with trying to avoid interpersonal violence. It may be intended to avoid inappropriate sexual conduct. And I think there is an additional element which may not be properly addressed, and that is responsibilities, both in the sense of responsibilities to the spouse or partner, but also responsibilities to the child. So what I'm advocating for is that in relationship classes or lessons or workshops, there should be an element which refers to the need to make sure that the person you're going to have a child with is a person you are going to get on with, and a person that is going to ensure a permanent, long-standing relationship. That is because I think it's more or less understood that a child will thrive when there is a stable home and without terrible upsets in his life. And of course, the breakup of a relationship between the parents is itself an upset. The child needs stability, and suddenly the ground on which he is standing is shaking, and there's an earthquake going on. And as a result, he has not only lost the stable home, but he's also lost his faith in long-term spousal relationships. And of course, if things go bad, he may lose his experience of proper normative child-parent relationships. So we have to do something in order to avoid people hooking up and having children with an inappropriate partner. What that means is that we need to be able to educate our adolescents, our teenagers, about coercive controlling behavior. And I think by the third or fourth date, it should be possible to identify a partner who is engaging in coercive control. That may take the form of criticism of the way the partner dresses. It may involve removing or trying to persuade the partner not to have contact with friends. It may take the form of insisting on a particular kind of date. We had a young lady with us for a meal, and she said that she'd gone out with a guy who insisted on making a barbecue on a very cold night in Jerusalem. And when she suggested that they go to a restaurant instead, he said basically my way or the highway. That's an example of the possibility of coercive control. And allied to that is identification of personality disorders. I'm not suggesting here that adolescents should have courses in abnormal psychology or in psychiatry, but I am suggesting that they should have some kind of indication about what are the behaviors when they're dating, which might indicate that any relationship may not be long-standing. What that means is that we're trying to avoid a situation in which a child is conceived and the relationship between the parents is in some way liable to break up from the very outset. Schools, therefore, have a responsibility, I think, to include that kind of program in their lessons for youngsters about relationships. But that requires, of course, that educators themselves be educated. It requires training. It requires that educators, and that means from the principal to the vice principal to the homeroom teachers to the professional teachers and even the other staff in the school, be alerted to how to identify a child who may be affected by parental separation. And only if that happens can the relationship classes be properly delivered. But that leads on to the second area, which is early identification. I heard a lecture by the principal of a school in the United States who said that all of her staff are instructed to watch out for signs of distress in a child. She said the most important sources of information are the crossing guard and the lady who serves the meals. These are people who are not educators, but they establish a relationship with the children, and they will be able to spot changes in the way a child looks or the way a child behaves, perhaps earlier than a teacher standing in front of a classroom with 20 or 30 pupils. But that requires, again, as I say, training. It means that all of the school staff have to understand what happens to a child when the parents are separating, and of course, when they're fighting, when there's violence, and the different ways in which a child may react. That may take forms which are more or less obvious. A child appears with bruises, then of course that has to be reported. If a child is unusually depressed, a child who was an excellent student, the grades suddenly start to drop. A child who is a very friendly child becomes a loner, or a child who was a loner is hooking up with the less able and less obedient kids in the class. It may be that the child is hygiene problems, is not coming properly equipped, has stopped doing homework. But there's another phenomenon that also needs to be taken account of, and that is a child who was an average student may start to excel in class. And the reason given for that may be that the child is not getting any positive feedback from the parents who are so busy with their own dispute that they are ignoring or forgetting about the needs of the child. Whereas a school teacher will praise a child who is excelling at lessons. And that, of course, is counterintuitive, like so much of what we know about what happens to children. That a child who excels, we say, oh, he's doing fine. Well, it may be he's doing fine in his studies, but that may be against a background of serious problems at home that he's trying to resolve in a different way. There are more obvious issues. For example, if your kids in certain grades have to do a description of their family or their roots, and if one of them doesn't want to talk about daddy or doesn't want to talk about mommy, then that's a clear indication that there's something wrong in the relationships at home. And there are many, many other different ways in which a child will, either by acting out or by withdrawing, there are many different ways in which a child will react to trouble at home. So all the school staff need to be able to identify that. In addition, the school staff need to identify inappropriate behavior by the parents or one of them in school. The school secretariat, when a child is coming in to be registered and the parent refuses to give the name of the other parent, or where a parent says there's a banning order stopping the other parent from being in the school grounds or meeting the child, the school secretary needs to ask for a sealed court document saying that there is in fact such an order in force. They shouldn't just accept that as read. I had a case in which a mother registered the child and put the name of her husband, who was not the father of the child, as next of kin. And of course, the biological father got wind of that, and it caused no end of trouble. And there are parents who will manipulate the school staff. They will try and get the school staff on their side in what they perceive as being a war against the other parent. And people in the educational institution need to be warned about that and not to get dragged into the conflict. I had a case before me in which a mother said that her child had been sexually interfered with by the father. And she brought in the kindergarten teacher. The child was 2 or 3 years old, and the kindergarten principal to give evidence. And it was perfectly clear that neither the teacher nor the principal had seen anything wrong going on, but had been convinced by the mother that there were offences being committed. And when I asked them if they had, under the reporting law, reported this to the police or to a social worker, they mumbled. So this is an example of how school staff can be enlisted in this unholy battle for the child by one of the parents. There are other issues involved. For example, supposing little Johnny or little Jeannie is going to be picked up by daddy because it's his turn, and mommy shows up and outside the school gate starts screaming at the father and says, "You're a scumbag, you don't pay your child support payments, you're drunk." Or supposing it's mommy's turn to pick up the child and daddy shows up and starts screaming abuse and insults about the mother's partner. That is behavior which indicates that the child has already been or is liable to be affected by strife between the parents. And at that point, the school staff need to be aware, and they need to have the tools with which to intervene. What that means is, of course, that the child and the parents need to be referred for some kind of intervention. The parents may need to be referred to parental re-education so that they will be told about their responsibilities to the child, which include ensuring that the child has good relationships with both parents and their families, even though the parents are separating and divorcing. That may come as a new thing for one of the parents. And of course, the interface with the law is important here. If they're fighting over what we call custody, then of course they will want to round up as much evidence as they can that the other parent doesn't love the child, or the other parent abuses or neglects the child. If, as is happening in many places, and I think should happen all over, we should stop talking about a custodial parent and another parent. We should stop talking about custody and visitation. We should talk about the division of parental responsibilities and the division of time between the parents. That may have a knock-on effect, but there will always be people who want to take revenge and will use the child. That's why, in many cases, a short intervention for re-educating the parents may help to resolve some of the problems. And the child who is involved in this conflict needs help. The child needs help in many areas. First of all, to survive. Secondly, not to get dragged into the conflict and not to develop all the phenomena that we know about in parental alienation, including fabricating stories or repeating stories about the rejected parent. A child who looks like they're getting involved in that needs help through it. So we're talking about interventions for the child and for the parents. There is another area in which the school can help. We have a scheme here in one of our cities of providing a big brother or big sister, usually a student, maybe a student of social work or psychology or someone else who himself or herself has been through parental separation and divorce and can spend an hour or two every week with the child on a one-on-one basis as a reliable, neutral adult who is able to help the child to talk through and speak about what he or she is going through. And there is also a great deal of benefit in making small groups for group work for the children who are going through parental separation and divorce. It is very common for children in this situation to think they're the only children in the world who have to go through that. And if you can put 5 or 6 of them in a group with a proper, well-trained person looking after them, then they can be encouraged to talk about the situation they're in and learn from each other coping tools. And in addition, there is good reason why the school can be the place in which divorcing parents can come together, one from each couple. Obviously, when the couples are fighting, you don't want the dad and the mom of a particular child in the same group. But support groups for parents who are going through separation and divorce. A support group can be extremely helpful in enabling them to weather the situation they're going through, to learn again from each other how to cope with the situation and how best to protect the child from harm. So those are some of the ways in which people in the education professions can help with primary prevention and then early identification and immediate intervention. Clearly, there needs to be someone in the school who is going to put together all the information coming from different sources. It may be there's important information from the crossing guard and from one of the sports teachers, but the homeroom teacher may not have that. So the school should appoint a single individual whose job it is to receive reports from all around the school ecosystem and put these things together. And then how to call in the parents and say, look, little Johnny, little Jeannie, there's obviously something wrong. Is everything okay at home? And then refer them and the child for professional intervention, as I've said. In that way, there will not be 3 or 4 different isolated bits of information, which if put together would indicate that the child is suffering, but if not, it may be just an indication that the child is just going through a stage. So that's also part of what school boards, school systems, principals ought to be doing. So there are some of the ways in which educational institutions can help children who are involved in a situation in which the parents are separating and divorcing. Again, my thanks to Eileen and to Family Access, Fighting for Children's Rights. If anyone wants more information about the programs which we are putting together, then my email address is philipmarcusjurist@gmail.com. I'm sure Eileen will put that up at some appropriate stage. Thank you for your attention.
Sadly, too many know the pain and trauma associated with parental and grandparent alienation. Family Access, Fighting for Children's Rights, will present an important international virtual conference on October the 13th through the 15th, 2023. The conference, entitled Alienation, The Truth Regarding the Trauma and Abuse, will feature world-renowned experts in the field of alienation. You'll join the conference event coordinator, Elaine Cobb, and moderator, Megan Hunter, as they introduce you to keynote speaker, Dr. Edward Kruk. Plus, you'll hear important presentations from Dr. Joshua Coleman, Lisa Rothfuss, Dr. Mary Alvarez, Chris Smith, Bill Eddy, Dr. Noel Hunter, Dr. Sue Kornblum, Dr. William Burnett, Megan Hunter, and Jordan Traeger. Join the many attendees already securing their spot for the conference entitled Alienation, The Truth Regarding the Trauma and Abuse. For information, visit familyaccess.info for all the details. This special conference is being hosted by Family Access, Fighting for Children's Rights, Steel Partners Foundation, and PASCA. Parental alienation is child abuse.
Next week on Families Divided TV, Dr. William Burnett will present on parental alienation contagion, an epidemic of misinformation.